what do I start with? It feels like I should be doing book club, like, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, every time that we do this in this format. If you guys didn't know, we're going to be doing a discuss today. Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Betwixt the Books. We're going to be doing a discuss today where Gretchen and I are discussing our bookish pet peeves, because we had a little bit of a rough February, both of us. But you know, sometimes it's nice just to sit and chat about bookish stuff and not have to read anything specifically. So that's what we're doing today. Yeah.
I mean, one could argue that the entire purpose of a dual person channel is that sometimes we don't have to talk individually to a camera.
Are you wit? I also like this format because it lets me like respond to what you're saying. Like when we do our normal back and forth reviews, like they're very structured and like I don't really get a chance to like comment most of the time on the thing that you just said. Whereas this is more freeform and edited less and things like that. So I like these styles of video. We just don't do them all that often.
Being an adult is hard, guys.
Anyway, if I look like a drowned rat, I'm sorry. I just showered. That's all I got.
I mean, this is not my normal nice background because, you know, sharing spaces with significant others means that he's munching on chips and hitting the keyboard over there. So
I don't have a significant other at the moment. Mine's gone to Puerto Rico without me. Very rude.
I was gonna say, you still have one. He's just not in the local vicinity.
Oh no, he's gone.
He ran away.
I don't have access to him. He's on an island fishing and stuff. I don't know, man. No, I still have one. He's still around. He's just not. He's not in the building. Not in the state. Not you know. Just in Puerto Rico. Anyway, yes, bookish pet peeves. Hi. We're here to talk about bookish pet peeves. Do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
I'm happy to start. And one of the reasons that we kind of had the idea for this discuss was because in the last couple of reviews that we've done together, this has actually come up. Not intentionally, but we have reviewed in the last couple of months a couple of novellas. I mean, we reviewed the books intentionally, but we didn't say like it's novella time.
It's just easy because they're shorter.
Yeah, well, but I mean, we wanted to review the books for specific reasons, and they happen to be novellas.
Yeah.
And Michaela suggested both of them, and for both of them, she was like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Because if you watch either our review of What Moves the Dead, or Heart Haunt Havoc, is that the order they go in?
Yep.
I keep mixing it up. Heart Haunt Havoc was the most recent one, which was like a horror, romance, fantasy, inclusive, representative novella. Very good. You should go watch that. But again, Michaela for both of them was like, hey, are you sure? Because I have a pet peeve with novellas. And I always hate saying that in reviews because, again, I knew what I was reading, right? Like I didn't open the book and go, oh, I am surprised to find that this is not an entire full-length novel because like I know going into it. And it always seems so unfair to then in my review be like, I didn't link it because there wasn't enough in it. Like it feels petty. So I call it a bookish pet peeve just because it is so rare for a novella to have all of the information in it that I want. They're really, really hard to do. And I would argue that like a short story or a novella can be harder to write than a full-length novel, because in a full-length novel, you have the space and time to include character building, relationship building, world building, and like really kind of work on all of this stuff. When in a shorter form, you have to be intentional about what is there and how you use that space. And I'm really, really bratty about how I talk about that, which is why when we read What Moves the Dead, I remember when we came in to do the review and I was like, Michaela, this was a horror novella, which are two things I don't like. And I really enjoyed that. So I can enjoy it, but I rarely do. And then I show up to review and I'm like, I didn't like it because it is exactly what it said it was.
I didn't like it because it was a novella. Weird how that happened. Full-length novel just shrinks down in her hands.
I crush it with my strength.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from with that because, yeah, like we both agreed that in Heart Haunt Havoc specifically, there was like, we didn't feel like there was enough space given to the relationship building. Like we didn't understand where the shift happened because it didn't feel like it had happened yet. And that the length of that kind of is what causes it. So it's totally fair to like not be a big novella person. I tend to like novellas for my ADHD because it's short enough to keep my attention the whole time. As soon as I get a larger book, I sometimes have trouble continuing with it. It's easier for me to read something if I can read it in one sitting, whereas if I put it down, it's a lot harder for me to pick something back up again. At least right now, as an adult, that wasn't always the case, but yeah, so I totally get where you're coming from, but also on the topic of difficult for me to pick something back up again, I mentioned how I struggle with books that have more than 3 point of views in them. So like I can do 1 point of view, I can do 2 point of view, 3 point of view, kind of starting to push it. Once you get past that, to me, it feels like you're constantly restarting the plot. Like it affects the flow of the book. And with someone who like really needs to get like drawn in for the flow to like keep me moving, to keep me interested and engaged in a book, constantly having to restart that makes it horrible. Starting books is the hardest part of reading for me. Like getting past the first 100 pages is always the hardest part for me. Once I'm like engaged with the characters and with the plot, then I can sit there and read like 400 pages like nothing. I'll just sit there and read them all. But when I feel like I'm reading the first 20 pages and then reading the first 20 pages of another story and then reading the first 20 pages of another story, I can't do it. And I'm not going to finish it. It's going to get put down. Or worse, I don't like one of those characters. And then I'm like, I don't want to read this. You just like skip it. Like, what do you do? Too many POVs. Like, I won't pick it up. Like, if I see that it's got multiple POVs to that point, I literally won't pick up the book. And that's what happens, is that it just doesn't get read. So personal thing, might be common to a lot of ADHD people, but like it really affects the flow and I can't.
I mean, you're giving me anxiety flashbacks to Realmbreaker, which I think was one of my like major peeves of that book. And okay, I'm about to just reveal again more about how finicky I am. Okay. So like I had the same issue with that book. There were too many points of view. And I agree that that's also really worrisome if there's a character you don't like or characters you don't like as much. But like you need to read those parts to know the plot, but you're like, why?
Yeah.
And I mean, Realmbreaker was like a whole thing. There's a reason that video is titled Realmbreaker Broke Me. But I also have a habit of really not being a huge fan. Now, this is romance specific. Okay, I have no problem with a single point of view in like a fantasy book, in a literary fiction, I mean, depending. But specifically, I'm reading a lot of romance. As you know, I review a lot of romance for the channel. And I have a really hard time with single POV romances. And this came up in Heart Haunt Havoc, but it's also come up in a couple of my recent romance reviews as well. There's actually one that I literally titled, I like to single POV romance. Because I read romance because I love watching a relationship build. And in a really good romance, that's building on both sides. But not only is it building on both sides, I really prefer my romances where each character is like their own individual person, right? And they've got their own things going on and maybe some side characters on both. And so whenever I read a single POV romance, I always feel like the character that doesn't get the POV, which in heterosexual romance is often the guy, for whatever reason, probably because women write and read a lot of romance, and in a hetero couple, that's just kind of what happens. But I have read LGBTQ like single POVs as well. But I just feel like I don't get to know that character as well. I don't understand their motivations as well. I don't get to watch that character fall in love. with the other character. You only see the one side, and often it's being done because the character who doesn't have a point of view is like hiding something. And that just, I mean, we'll talk about how I feel about characters hiding things a little later, but I just don't like it. I feel like it's a whole chunk of the book that's missing. And so again, I always feel like when I review a single POV romance for the channel, I'm like, listen, I read this book knowing what it was, and I'm sorry.
She always wants more. Gretchen's so greedy. She needs more pages. She needs more point of view.
I just want the whole story, okay? I want every single stinking detail of this story, except I can't have too much detail because it's boring.
There's this really sweet spot that Gretchen needs. She's so specific. If we're talking about romance tropes that bother us, I mentioned how I hate the miscommunication trope. And this isn't exclusive to romance, but it is used a lot in romance. It is my least favorite thing when especially if it's the like main source of disagreement in a relationship, is when one person could literally resolve the whole thing by just explaining themselves in like less than a minute. Just like talk a little bit more and you would be fine. Like in romance where all of the plot is these two characters talking to each other, the inability to talk to each other is the most frustrating thing in my life. I hate it so much. It happens in other genres, like miscommunication is like an easy way to create like I guess social, what is that, like
Tension,
I guess, yeah.
or I mean it creates, and I mean specifically again for romance, like as many people know, if you read the genre, there's that thing at the 75% mark where they have to have a fight and break up, right?
I hate it.
And I mean,
they don't though, but do they have to do that? They don't.
They don't, but that's part of like the romance genre. And so I mean it's like tension and then like conflict as well, because otherwise they just kiss.
Yeah, just keep doing that. You're good.
Yeah, well, I remember when I reviewed Kiss My Cupcake by Helena Hunting, and this is an older review for me now, but I literally remember that, I mean, I liked the book, but I knew when I read it, I had to make a review for the sheer fact that there was no like 75% of the way miscommunication nonsense. And I'm literally like, I'm watching the percentage on my phone, like get closer and closer to 100. And I'm like, this is impossible. This has never happened in all of history. I'm sure it's happened elsewhere, and I have read other books when it happened, but I think that was one of the first ones where I was ever like, it didn't do the thing.
It didn't do it. Yeah. I vastly prefer when they don't break up 3/4 of the way through for no apparent reason, or for something that could have been explained in one sentence.
Yeah, but that's the peeve, right? It's like sometimes there is like
if somebody does something that causes like an issue, like if there's an actual problem, but if the problem is you didn't take the time to explain something to the other person, no.
I mean, secondary peeve to that though is like when one of the characters does something that is like some kind of huge betrayal of trust, and then in like the last 10% of the book the other character just decides to forgive them and they live like happily ever after. I've also definitely read some where I'm like, no, that's you should have stayed broken. That's
like an you stay broken up problem. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like that's like they need some reason to have a fight, and sometimes some of the reasons are the stupidest things you've ever heard of. And I mean, yes, sometimes fights are caused by dumb things, but like the number of times when it is, like you said, it could have been explained in less than 10 words and in less than 60 seconds, and it didn't have to be like this.
Did not.
When Michaela and I were talking about this earlier, we were talking about the trifecta of peeves that came up for me in Heart Haunt Havoc. And I feel like if you haven't seen that review and you're watching this, you must have thought I hated that book. I didn't. No. You should go watch that review. It's a really fascinating, interesting book. I'm just a persnickety cat, okay? And so the third thing that happened in that I was like, was there was this withholding trope, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. And this is the trope where you know, as like the reader, that someone is withholding information, and the author is like making all of these allusions, like if only they told their or whatever, and you're like, just tell me the secret. Just tell me, like, why? And Michaela was saying, you know, that miscommunication bothers her more than the withholding thing. And I was like, I've read so many romances at this point that I don't even care anymore. If I cared every single time there was a piece of miscommunication, I would have to stop reading.
Like so many books. Yeah, that's
But there's
fair.
something, and I mean, I brought this up in the Heart Havoc review, and it's like I get peevish when I see withholding, and I don't understand the reason for it.
Why?
But I
Explain
can,
it,
yeah, but I can forgive it later if it like it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I feel like the problem often with the withholding trope is that it's literally just held for dramatic effect. And if the author can't come up with a good reason, except for they wanted to move that plot point further down the road, or they wanted there to be a miscommunication or something, I just get really mad, because I know that that's like author intervention, right? And the only reason that information was withheld was because this, whatever this was, needed to happen later. And it's not a natural thing.
You had that issue in the second book in the Crescent City series too, right? Like there was something that like a character knew, but like didn't talk about for like several hundred pages.
Oh no, that was worse.
Oh, okay.
That was worse. And it happened in both of the Crescent City books. And it
See?
So the Crescent City books by Sarah J. Maas are one of those books that have multiple POVs. There's like a bedoodle of them.
Yes.
And the thing that happens in those books, in both of those books, different characters do this, and you know that it's authorial intention, is that all of a sudden, in the first book, the character who's hiding information is continuing to have point of view chapters where very oddly they don't think about this major like betrayal they are about to do.
Yes, yeah.
And you're like, excuse me, what? And then in the second book, one of the main characters just very suddenly stops having POV chapters until it is like revealed that they've known something that like basically also makes the entire middle of the plot totally like worthless, because they've known this entire time that this
they
was
could
a
have just
meaningless
said
side
something
quest.
at any time. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. That is worse.
Yeah.
That is worse, and it has been in both of those books, and I'm really, really mad about it. And I've now talked. This is a third video because I talked about it in my best and worst of last year video, and then we did a video on editing and poor editing in books. And oh, I'm sorry. I just have to cook in my own rage for a minute. That's just infuriating.
Yeah. On a slightly lighter note, but like still having to do with like the structure kind of certain books. Some folks might know that I tend to read novels more than series. And part of that reason is that so often I don't finish series, or B, like the books don't maintain a level of interest or a level of intrigue or any of that sort of stuff for me. So it's like really hard for me to commit to something that's like that long, right? But one of my biggest problems with like trilogies or series is the use of cliffhangers at the end of a book. Now there's plenty of people who are like, well, then just binge the series, right? Like wait until all of the books come out and then just read all of them. And I did that for Divergent. I read all 3 of the Divergent books over the course of a weekend, right when like the weekend that Allegiant came out, I think. I like read all of them together at that point. And that's fine if you have the time to read 3 novels all together back to back to back, which I don't really anymore as an adult. But even before that, I feel like books should be like encapsulated within themselves. Like you can totally have a series and have themes or unfinished plot threads that are going to be continued through there. It's when you start an action point at the end of the book where like something happens and then the book ends. Frustrates me. Put that at the first chapter of your next book. Like you can pick up right there. Don't start an action point right at the end of your book. I hate it. It makes me so mad. And it kind of makes me not want to pick up the next book. So it's done now the opposite of what you wanted, which was for me to want to pick up the next book immediately. I know that that's what the point is to like make you want to like go get the next one and like keep you invested. But like if I liked the book enough to enjoy these characters, or if the overarching plots or the overarching political things or whatever else is going on in the book is enough, it shouldn't need this like weird gimmick at the end to make me want to pick up the next book.
I also feel like we are the generation that was also, I mean, and this is still happening and I understand that, but I feel like more of the books that have become popular in YA more recently have a lot of them have been like standalones.
Yeah.
Or they have books that are like related, but they're not. But like we were definitely of the generation of the very strong YA trilogy situation, where I feel like a lot of those also had like a really, really good first book.
Yep.
A second book that was going to be them wanderings on some side quest.
Yep.
And then like a third book with the finale, and you were always just like hello.
I could have made this one book.
Yeah. I will say I do that now with when I read fantasy romances. I refuse to read anything that doesn't have the whole series out. For the fact that I am really, really cranky about, like in the best way, a slow burn romance. And if you're telling me that I'm watching a whole book and I'm reading this whole book and I'm watching a relationship develop, and then I have to wait
another book
and they haven't kissed yet. And I'm just like, yes. And I just can't do it. I just can't wait. I want to know then. I want them to kiss.
Kiss now, please. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. And that's why I tend to read standalone novels. It's like you have to convince me to pick up a series. Like it's hard at this point in my life for me to like want to start a series. I can do romance series because those tend to be like companion pieces, right? Like here's other characters in the same world, and maybe there's an overarching plot world-wise that's going on that like maybe you care about. But like, yeah, it's really hard to get me to pick up a series at this point that's following the same characters. That's probably bad, but it's true.
So speaking of fantasy series, there have been a couple that Michaela and I have read together all the way through, actually, despite this conversation. There are a couple that we finished, and long time watchers may remember that we did like a series of like 2 or 3 years where we read a book in Lev Grossman's Magicians book, like on New Year's. It's like our New Year's special.
Yeah.
Although I feel like after the first book, it just became like our own New Year's torture.
Yeah. Because we were like, here's this book that we've had very mixed feelings about. Let's read the next one.
And then we more recently had this discussion when we talked about Scarlett St. Clair's Hades and Persephone series. We did a Betwixt After Dark like full series review, although it's surprisingly now not the full series because the internet lied. It's fine. Everything's fine.
I love when that happens. I don't love it.
But this came up in both of those books, and we have never disagreed on this, full stop. I don't even think, when Michaela brought this up, I was like, this is not a peeve, and it's a fact. And here it is. It's that sexual violence should not be used as a plot point in books. And now let me qualify that statement, right? I'm not saying that sexual violence cannot appear in any book ever. That's not what I'm saying. There are very powerful stories about survivors and like things that people need and should exist in the world. I'm not saying that those should not exist. What happened in both of these series that I just mentioned, though, it was like sexual violence was used as like a way to move the plot forward. Like it was not treated with the gravity it deserved. It just kind of happens. And the entire reason is like, okay, well, we need this character to have trauma now. And here you go, trauma. And it's not treated delicately. It's not treated, with any kind of compassion or kindness or, seriousness. It's just like.
And in the case of the magicians, it was used for her positive character growth. Like, it was real bad. Like she got what she wanted because of the sexual violence that was used against her. Like, that was real bad. It was real bad, guys.
The thing also in the Hades and Persephone books is that in the magicians, that's annoying. And you get no warning, and it happens at the end. But it only happens the one time that I remember. What Michaela and I realized as we were talking about the Hades and Persephone books is that sexual assault, or at least the threat of sexual violence, is used as a plot device in every single one of those books at least once. And, those books got really popular on TikTok. And so when they were really popular, I was still working at the library, and there was a girl on staff who's much younger than me who was like, oh, I picked these up and I might want to read them. And, she had the book like on her desk. She's a teen librarian. And I know that she was talking like, her kids always ask her, like her teens were always like, what are you reading? And I was like, you do not have that out on your desk. If you make the choice to read it, that's for you to decide. But don't, there's a lot more sexual violence or threat of sexual violence in that book that I did not realize that we were signing up for when it started. And you just need to be really, really careful. And like, if you don't want to read that, I wouldn't read that series. And she just kind of looked at me and she went, thank God it's a library book. Because, I understand that kind of stuff is used in some dark romances. But there is a reason that romance is really good at putting, tropes and triggers and whatever in the description. Because if you are giving that out to people who don't know what they're signing up for, that's just like, that's a little bit too far for me.
Can be majorly triggering for people. Yeah. Unknown essay stuff is not fun for people who have survived it to just have that thrown at them. Yeah. On a lighter note, there's no real way to transition out of that. It's a bad thing to happen. It's like something that, like, if we could eradicate it from writing, we would. Like, we don't think that it should be there at all. But similarly, in like a feminism thing, I mentioned how there's just some books where you pick them up. Specifically for me, this has been in fantasy, in adult fantasy written by men. The way that they describe the female characters, as soon as they start talking about the women, specifically about their breasts, I check out. I'm like, nope, I can't read this if this is how your like male POV characters is thinking about the women, that especially if they're just interacting them for the first time and immediately they are a sexual object. Immediately. It's why I can't read like the Witcher books. There was another, I don't remember the author, but there was another author where I like started to try to read a series and I was like, the way that you talk about women makes me uncomfortable and I can't read it because of that. Just because like immediately I'm like, when you're making them sexual objects, when like it feels gross. And I hope there are not men walking around that think this way. Although the fact that these books exist makes me think that they definitely do. And it makes me uncomfortable because I have never in my life looked at a person and my first thoughts has to do about their body and what it looks like and what I want to do to it. At no point have I ever had that experience. Might just because I'm Demi, but at no point have I looked at somebody and that's been the way that I perceive them immediately.
There's like a difference too in like some romance novels where, lust at first sight is like a really big thing. And I'm not a fan of it. It does not always work for me. And I'm straight. I just don't like characters who are assholes. But I will say there is a use to that trope when like the whole point, and I've definitely seen this done successfully in romance novels where like the guy starts off as a huge douche And then like the woman is just like way smarter than him, and it ends up putting him on his butt. And he has to like learn to be a better person. And does that storyline work
Why
successfully?
is that the woman's job? Just be a better person, my guy.
You could ask a lot of romance novels why it is the woman's job to, because that's also one of the tropes I don't like is like, you know, it's very, I have seen this not this way, but again, in a hetero situation where like the guy is very job driven and he's a high powered like millionaire and he needs a woman in his life to like remind him how to be a human being, and it's her entire job to like humanize him, and then he starts treating his staff better. And yeah, so that's a whole thing. I don't like that, but you know, I digress.
It happens.
Because I was in a more fun note, Michaela brought that up, and I was like, oh yeah, that's not the problem that I have in my romance novels. And not that it doesn't happen, but I read a lot of romance nominally written by women, and a lot of romance written by women is meant to be like a female fulfillment fantasy, right? Which is fine. I love me some romance. But here's the thing. If I have to read one more story, and again, this is specifically hetero romances where the dick that she is getting is the most magical dick she has ever gotten in her entire life, and it's perfect and it's big, and she's like never been able to come from penetration before, and now she's come 3 times and she's screaming and the big bang has happened all over again, and you're just like, okay, I think you need to calm down. There is some
unrelatable.
They're so overwritten. And this can come with the language, the way things are described. And I just start like skimming. And I'm just like, It's just so ridiculous. And again, it's all about the fantasy, right? And I love it. But at the same time, like in order for it to be a fantasy, it has to be like a little bit believable. And
relatable.
Yeah, I have never recreated the Big Bang. That's all I have to say.
I honestly, guys, if you have recommendations for romance books where people use toys in the bedroom, and like there's kink books, right? Okay, that's one thing. Like I think I've seen toys used more often in kink books because they're used for that purpose. But just like a regular old sex scene where somebody's like, you know what? No, I need a vibrator. Like just add a vibrator into this, and I would, or like just something, because most of us, penetration is not going to do it. It's just not going to get you there.
Like it's like the sex scenes are always like, it seems like, no, 99% of the time, just like the most profound or sexy thing that has ever happened to them. And I'm like, does no one have fun sex? Like, still, like things don't work out. Like, you know, you have to. Why is it always just like, again,
more jokes, more laughing during sex?
So just always the birth of the universe. I'm just like, stop.
It's the best sex that anyone ever has had ever.
I mean,
and it was just missionary. And it was just missionary.
And it lasts for like, there's no foreplay whatsoever. No.
Horrible.
No, thank you. I don't want it anymore.
And that's when Gretchen skips the sex scenes.
I genuinely do. I've genuinely gotten to the point in some books where I'm like, I don't care anymore. Although there are some that I just skip because I find them odd. When like, and I talked about this in Secretly Yours by Tessa Bailey. The female character is a gardener, and the guy in that book just like really, really wants to see her like on her hands and knees in the dirt in the garden. And he's like, they end up having a sex scene in the garden where she's like literally getting dirty. And I'm just like panicking the whole time. And I'm just like, dirt is going to get in places you are not going to be able to get it out. And meanwhile, they're having like, this is the most profound moment of my life. No. And I'm like, no, there's dirt.
Gross. I will say, and I think I've mentioned it in some video before, but like one of my favorite romance books is a Kresley Cole book where one of the love interests is a ghost and the other one is a vampire who cannot get it up because he hasn't been blooded because in this world they don't get a heartbeat back until they meet their fated mate. So like you have two characters who cannot physically have sex, and there are sex scenes where they have to do foreplay because there's nothing else. Like they can't touch, like it doesn't, which made it great, like putting the constraint on there that like you can't. So sexy, so great, love that. Best. Give me more give me more impotent men. Loved it. It's a good, hey, I enjoyed myself. It was a good time.
I mean, yeah.
Even better, the guy was a virgin. Impotent virgin.
Yeah, also just give me more male virgins. Why is it always the guy who's had 16,000 partners, and the woman is like, you are the best magic dick I've ever had because you're the only dick I've ever had.
The best magic dick. Does it glow?
They should get that checked out.
Anyway, that was our fun discussion of some of our bookish pet peeves. I'm sure there are more. This was just the ones that we could think of. And yeah, we ended it on a late note, which is what we wanted to do anyway. There is a book that we're supposed to be reading. Will we read it for next time? Who knows? When is next time? Who knows? Listen.
Yeah. I'm in the middle of, so this is my last full-time semester of coursework for my PhD. I have another semester of coursework, but I don't have to take a full-time load of classes, which is great. And then I don't have any more classes. I literally have to do my comps and my dissertation, which is going to be also annoying. But I mean, this is my last really major push. And next week, I think I'm supposed to have my 4th dental surgery in what is now a 3-month escapade. So, yeah, I'm cooked. I am a cooked goose.
I just am me. I'm working full time for retail, which sucks. It always sucks. Yay.
Being an adult is hard.
Yeah.
But it is always so great to come and spend time with Michaela. And Michaela is so right that part of what makes this format great is that we get to answer each other and laugh. And not like, I mean, we laugh when we film our reviews for you guys, but you don't normally get to see that or hear it because we're like filming in a really odd like situation with like 2 cameras and then the computer between us. So thank you for spending the time with us watching this video. And obviously, like Michaela said, we did not get all of them. Do you have other ones? Do you agree with us, disagree with us? I have some that are nonfiction specific that didn't come up in this video. So continue the conversation with us if you want down in the comments below. And you know what? The best part about this channel is that we do it for fun. The worst part about this channel is that we do it for fun. So you guys know that when we bring you content, it's because we wanted to, and we are not being inauthentic robots. So when we are ready to come back and have fun with y'all again, that is what we will do. But until then, we're going to go do some work.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.